Hi, I'm Rob Vanstone, and welcome to I'm so glad to say this, Mosaic Stadium press box for the first training camp edition of Rider Rumblings since 2019. I am accompanied in the press box by Montreal Expos fan. A great hat adorns his dome, Murray McCormick, who is about 15 yards to my left. We are practicing social distancing despite the relaxation of restrictions. So where to start? There's so much to discuss. There's obviously Rider camp. There's the injuries that occurred nearly a week ago and their impact on Rider camp. There's myriad topics. So why am I still babbling? Mur, please take us in a direction that so far I cannot comprehend.
How about we give them the advantage? I know this is going to be recorded, posted a little later, but we're live at training camp and we're watching things unfold before our very eyes right now. And I'm seeing they're putting on pads and helmets, which means there's going to be a little contact today. It'll be a little more competition stuff. They're kind of moving forward, I guess, with training camp and making it more realistic. So it's kind of an exciting day. I always love pads day. It's more kind of enjoyable when you're down when it's in Saskatoon because you're closer to the action and you could hear the pads are popping and that kind of stuff, which always makes practice a little more exciting. But it looks like they're moving forward. I think we have to mention it's a long training camp. I still haven't figured. I'm not quite sure when it ends. I do know it's going to be over by August 6th. So you do the numbers back from there. But it's a long training camp. But I'm curious to see how Craig Dickinson keeps it fresh and exciting for the guys without a game, without that. Because football players practice, but they practice with an intention, and the intention is to playing a game. And not even having a preseason game to see what they can prove to show themselves is really got to be a tough thing. And I don't think there's many days off, other than you and I getting our days off in here, squeezing our days off. I think these guys go every day. So it's not as if it's different. It's a different training camp. Obviously, we know that, but it's just going to be interesting to see what Craig Dickinson does for the next little while and keeping things fresh and exciting for the guys.
How often do players and coaches say leading up to the first preseason game that it'll be nice to see somebody else and to hit somebody else in anger as opposed to friendly fire? So again, even though the season is uncommonly short, the preseason is uncommonly lengthy. So yeah, they're going to have to do some things to jazz it up and maybe give the players a bit of a break from time to time, because the monotony will really wear thin, I think, after a while. I mean, even like have a soccer game or something, or just have a day where unexpectedly you just lighten it up and the focus is on levity. And I think that would be the other thing is away from here. They're limited as far as what they can do as far as team bonding. They're limited as far as what they can do away from the stadium. So I think the non-venue same old factor could certainly be something that the players and coaches are going to have to contend with. There's going to be a lot of Groundhog Days here, so that's certainly going to be a factor.
It will be, yes. I think as it's, but guess what they've been doing for the last 2 months or 2 years. There's nothing to do with football, and so I think they're excited. They're football players, they're athletes. That's what they do for a living. So I think they're glad to be here. No one's complaining. I'm not saying anybody's complaining about going on. Don't even let me insinuate that, but it's. They all have families. They all had lives working down in the States and stuff. And it's a big change to come up here and be away for so long. And I know I used to be, I can tell people, my wife used to like it when I went away to training camp. Having that break from me and having the house to herself is always a nice thing, but not anymore. It's just going to be a little different thing.
Well, we'll see if the locks have been changed by the time you get home this afternoon. I'm not insinuating anything. Everything is harmonious in the McCormick clan. Marion and Murray are as close a couple as one can possibly conceive of. What do you like? Sorry?
Absence makes the heart grow fonder. That's it.
Who's impressed you so far?
Well, I'm going to jump out on a limb here, and I think Cody has. I think Cody's come in here. He's looked pretty sharp. The amount I've watched, get to see him actually throw passes for real. I think we always have to temper that because sometimes he may overthrow him or there may be a drop, but is it his fault or is it the receiver's fault? It's not always just on Cody. But I've kind of liked Cody. I'm going to
I
bring it
think
out.
he's going to be their starting quarterback.
You think so? I think so.
Yeah.
There's a good chance that. I'm also going to be, and I know I've said this probably in the first round. I'm rooting for Jake Hardy, and
Oh,
he's come out here and just kind of lit it up a little bit. Like he's making big plays, he's making passes. You notice him on the field. He's wearing Andy Fantuzzi's old number, which is a weight or maybe a motivation for him. As I've said before, I was at training camp the day he blew his knee out, and it's still one of the until last Thursday, it's probably one of the more traumatic things I've seen at training camp. I didn't see what happened Thursday, but just to see a guy lose all his opportunities like that, and then hurt it again. Very, very similar to Rob Bagg. Rob Bagg bounced back and had an incredible career. Maybe Jake Hardy can. Were they going to fit him in? That's another question and whatnot. Another guy, and you mentioned him too, and because we're both here, is Braden Linnius. He's slim, man. I think he's lost 108 pounds, Rob. He just looks like a wide receiver. I think he's bet like he's got the body type and the length before to be a slot back. I think he could be a wide receiver, but he looks like he's moving. He's gliding when he's out there. His hands, I've always loved when he puts his hands up and catches the ball. So, there's not everybody in the football world is Rob's not the only football guy in the world that's lost some weight to get better. I think Braden Linnius has done that, and he's got such a background that I'm interested to see how he progresses during training camp. So far, he's looked pretty good. We'll have to see what happens. And I guess I'm just going to throw it out there. Mike Edom has been all over the field. He's going to be the starting safety, but he's been at Sam. He's been at some other positions, and he's just such a versatile player that he gets a little overlooked on this team, I think. It's because he's such a good, solid player. So I've been pretty impressed with him too. But maybe I'll throw some at you, Rob, to see if who you think, if there's any difference in mine. Try to pick
Mike Edom, one of the cooler stats ever. He was a West Division All-Star safety in 2019 without any interceptions. That tells you how many different things that he's capable of doing. Braden Linnius, they had him lined up slot back on Sunday, and they were just throwing against there. But he ran a post pattern, and the ball was just lofted up, and he jumped for the ball. I just realized what a catch radius he has, what a target, and he just his vertical must have taken him several inches, if not feet, above the level of that infamous crossbar in the north end zone. Jake Hardy, it's interesting. He wears number 83. You mentioned Andy Fantuz. Travis Moore wore number 83 for the Rough Riders. Travis Moore is now the receivers coach for the Rough Riders. He was also the receivers coach in Ottawa when Jake Hardy was there. So that 83 is all over the place. And what really impressed me is how well and how smoothly Jake Hardy is running, despite all the medical issues he's faced. That has not taken place at the expense of his athleticism or explosiveness. Just a really graceful, interesting, player to watch. And it looks to me like they really want to start two nationals at the receiving spots. A lot of the first team reps have included Justin McInnes as a wide receiver and Braden Linnius as a slot back, and they were the Rough Riders' first two selections in the 2019 CFL draft. But Jake Hardy could easily work into that equation as well. And you just wonder what the future holds for Terrell Jana, a second-round draft choice this past year, who was widely touted as a first-round possibility, if not a lock. And he's also part of the mix at receiver. So they've got a nice wealth of I keep wanting to say non-import, but Canadian receivers, and Mitch Picton's also part of that equation. So who else has impressed me? I really like Christian Campbell based upon what I saw at Monday's workout. It was the first day of 12-on-12 drills, and he's a rookie defensive back out of Penn State. And he had two pass knockdowns, covered tightly, and had an interception, albeit a really nice leaping interception of a pass thrown by Tom Flacco. So I'm not sure how many jobs are open in the secondary, but if they do opt to go with an American at the wide side corner with LJ McCraig on, and maybe Nelson Lacombo being injured and Eli Buka not yet being here might alter their thinking as far as initially starting a Canadian at that spot. I wonder whether somebody like Christian Campbell or one of the other defensive backs brought in from the States might be a candidate there. Craig Dickinson yesterday mentioned Keon Adams, a defensive end, could also play linebacker. And he said he was in the backfield a lot. Now, those were non-contact drills. so it wasn't the most challenging proposition to end up in the backfield when nobody's actually colliding with one another. But I think his quickness with that was evident and probably noteworthy in light of the fact that they need somebody to step up at defensive end, with Chad Jeter having retired and Freddie Bishop III having suffered one of the 4 Achilles tendon tears that were incurred last Thursday, and with Charleston Hughes now being with the Toronto Argonauts. So the defensive ends are something to watch. I'm not sure what kind of read we'll be able to get on them, at least until the Rough Riders have a scrimmage. But the preseason for the defensive ends might actually be the first 2 or 3 games of the regular season, as they try to get a read on what they have at defensive end. But I think Keon Adams has been the most impressive of that group so far.
He had he was going down on coverage on punt return or punt coverage on Sunday, and he ran into one of the little guys, and he just blew up the little guy. And I didn't get his number, but I'm sorry, one of the little returners. So it was the first contact we saw, and that was a pretty impressive hit by Keon. And he was very apologetic. You could see he's going, sorry, man, didn't mean to do this. But he showed a little bit of contact.
You should be able to get that number because it's probably stenciled on the turf after he hit it.
There was another just little point with Jake Hardy. I'm kind of, it's hard to find many good things from the 2-year break. I think Jake Hardy might have gained from being off. Like, he's 3 years off. Mind you, one of those years was spent rehabbing his knee, but maybe that gives him more of a chance to heal and to get his knees, because it's still hard. Like, I can't imagine having such a traumatic injury and then doing it again, because he basically had some issues, and then coming back out here and playing football. Like, what? These guys are motivated to play football, and good for them and good for Jake. And as I said, we'll be rooting for him to see what he does. I think he's going to make the team. I don't know where it'll be, but they have some good Canadian receivers. He's going to be in a tough battle, and it'll be interesting to see as it goes on further into this, what kind of the Canadian receivers stand out. The question is, we used to always berate preseason kids. Wonder how they're going to decide who makes the team. If there's between this guy, he looked really good in practice, but we have to look at his film and from university. Like, how are they going to decide that? What's going to be if let's say 2 of the quarterbacks are tied for let's say on the depth chart, let's say Paxton Lynch and Isaac Harker. Like, how do you determine which one becomes the second stringer and which one becomes the third stringer? You guys get paid to do that. Like, that's not exactly something that's hard. They'll find that challenging, but it'd be interesting to see how they get a guy to stand out in practice day after day. It's
not without precedent, though, in the football world. A lot of junior football teams, a lot of university football teams. Last year, the National Football League didn't have any preseason games. So I don't know if you pick the brains of other coaches who've been in that situation and try to get a read on that. But I think the Rough Riders are well equipped in that scenario, because their offensive coordinator is also their quarterback's coach, and someone who's a successful quarterback in the Canadian Football League in Jason Moss. So I think he's got a bit of an advantage in being able to assess.
He knows what he's doing.
One other thing I've really enjoyed watching is John Ryan sending punts into orbit. If there was any concern about how the 2-year layoff would affect a punter who turns 40 on November 26th, I think those concerns have been allayed just watching John Ryan send some 55-yarders to a height that it almost seems like the peak of the football or the peak of the kick is at eye level if we're sitting in the press box. Brett Lowther, again, nobody's trying to block the kicks, but he was trying 35-yard field goals the other day, and which, that's a rudimentary kick, but the ball was landing in the first row of the stand. So those kicks have 60 yards of length. Henry Nell, a global kicker, made a 60-yard field goal, albeit kicking off a tee, not even with a holder, but even a 57-yarder and then a 60-yarder on Sunday. So there's plenty of leg as far as what Henry Nell can do distance-wise. Maybe I was wondering, do you use maybe if you want to get a global on the field, do you use a global as a kickoff specialist? He's got to be on the roster anyway. Henry Nell's got a big leg. Why not have him kick off the ball?
He's got to do more than their last global player on the roster did.
Yeah, it's
not blaming poor Rene Barassi, but boy, he didn't get dressed for every game and just stood on the sideline.
That was the norm. There was an exception in Winnipeg, but for the most part, that's what globals are pretty much mannequins making the minimum salary. which is what we feel like some days too, Mer.
But him and Nell also has a background in indoor and arena football. Like he's from South Africa, but he's been over in the States for a while kicking. So maybe they can take advantage. There's a lot more to kicking kickoffs rather than just kicking them deep. There's angles and there's trying to put them off to the side of the field. So I haven't seen him do any of that yet, but we'll see what he does.
But he's got a big leg. He can boom it. So that's worth consideration. But I think if there was any talk that maybe that a global might supplant John Ryan, I mean, that would be absolutely.
I don't know who would even have
that? Would be absolutely foolhardy. Foolhardy is not a derivative of Jake Hardy, but John Ryan looks like he can be Bob Cameron if he wants to, and just keep rifling footballs for.
I know there's many things that's admirable about what John has done. The fact that he opted out of his contract because he didn't want to get the cues, because he didn't need the money. No, let someone else have the money. That's a good Canadian boy doing the right thing, and good on John for doing that. And not because John's made millions in the NFL and he's set for life, but he didn't need the money that was going to people that really needed it in Canada. And good on John for doing that.
Can I go on my weekly rant? Weekly tangential tantrum. The Canadian Football Hall of Fame. John Ryan should be a mortal lock for that when you consider what he has done at various levels of football in this country. But the rules of the Canadian Football Hall of Fame do not take into account even one iota what one has accomplished south of the border. Ruben May still is in the Canadian Football Hall of Fame. He rushed for 1,300 plus yards for New Orleans in 1986.
And he's a star in college too.
And there's myriad examples of Canadians who've done well. And Mark Rippon was a Super Bowl winning quarterback with Washington, and it accounts for nothing. John Ryan, what he did in the United States, what he did with the Green Bay Packers and Seattle Seahawks, and that's not to discount what he's done in Canada, because he averaged 50.6 yards a punt for Winnipeg in 2005. That's still a CFL single season record, but I doubt, even as durable as John Ryan is, I doubt that he's going to play in the CFL long enough to have the kind of longevity that would make him a lock, especially when you consider that Paul McCallum still is in the Canadian Football Hall of Fame. He's the second leading scorer in league history. So the special teams players don't usually get a break there. But John Ryan should be an absolute automatic for the Canadian Football Hall of Fame when you look what he has done in football. And they'll make allowances for players who never played in the CFL or played briefly in the CFL if they had a standout career in the Canadian college ranks. But if you go down to the NFL and do it at the highest level you can for an extended period, it counts for nothing. John Ryan should be as automatic as a selection can be for the Canadian Football Hall of Fame, and for just the Humanity Hall of Fame too, of which I'm volunteering to be the curator. But anyway, I just wanted to go on that little tangent because it just bugs me.
Well, I think we're missing kind of the big words there. It's Canadian Football Hall of Fame, and John's a Canadian and he's a football player. How can he not be in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, and that's exactly it. And plus, this year's 5 player inductees are all Americans.
Yeah.
So what is the focus here? I mean, it's so silly. John Ryan just should be decorated in every way that he can be decorated. I mean, he's been decorated by the University of Regina, as has his wonderful mother, Barb Ryan. That family is just Regina royalty. And anyway, I'm just so glad to see John Ryan out here, because there was, even after the 2019 season, he toyed a bit with whether to resume playing. And then you get a year off. And this is somebody who doesn't need to play professional football when you consider the money he's made. And it'd be very easy to stay in Southern California, enjoy that lifestyle, and enjoy spending time on the road with his wife, Sarah Colonna. But here he is. It's a great love of the game story, and he's fostered the love of the game in so many others with the contributions that he has made to minor football and to charity in Saskatchewan. So
I think he had to
come to see John Ryan out here.
He had to come back, Rob, after all the money the Ryan family invested in Rider jerseys. One season really wasn't enough. You got to give him a couple to get the money back in the Ryan jerseys and T-shirts. So they would have. I don't think they may have excommunicated him from the family if he'd only spent one season with the Riders. Not good kidding, but.
I mean, I hope he'll be placed till he's 50, and I hope I'm here to cover it. There's a better chance of him playing till he's 50. I'm getting old.
I think we've got to get into a point here. I think we have to discuss what happened last Thursday. I think the 4 Achilles injuries were, man, I still have problems believing it. And I know that seems kind of trite, but it's just the way the day started. We first heard about Larry Dean stealing tearing his Achilles, and then I got a couple texts saying, Murray, it's 3 other guys. And I went, what? 3 other guys did what? Torn their Achilles in the same practice and the same drill within, as the CFLPA did in their investigation, 6 minutes. That's just, who screwed up? Who blew it? Who got it all wrong? How does it all happen? And then the ride is funny, and then you're back here on Saturday because the game goes on. It doesn't stop just because some catastrophic injuries happen like that you say, oh, well, maybe the player should get a day off to assimilate what happened. But the game went on, and we're out here and we're trying to find guys replacing. I'll mention yesterday I saw all 4 of them on the sideline with their boots on. Larry Dean riding one of these kind of like 2-wheel bike things that support the Achilles tendons when they're injured like that. And it's just sad and tragic. And I've had friends of mine call me who, surprisingly, a number of guys between 30 and 40 have torn their Achilles, but they're recreational weekend warriors, and they did it playing basketball. But they says, just the pain and the agony from that, how it could happen to one guy and it just happens to another, and then finally they didn't shut it down.
Well, the thing is too, I mean, they've said that various people said, we do this drill all the time, and and nothing like that has happened. But when you get the same injury in the same drill within such a compact period of time, it's not a fluke anymore. If it happens to 1 player or 2 players, okay, maybe that's a fluke. But then players number 3 and number 4 go down. I have a hard time believing that drill is not a minor. The nature of the drill is not at least a minor contributing factor. I think that the restrictions did not work well there, because not allowing coaches to be at least the supervisory role created chaos there. There was nobody in authority to say, let's stop this.
Yeah.
They wanted to keep coaches away for whatever reason, but that would have saved 1, 2, or 3 injuries, you would think, if somebody was there to say no. And I'm not putting any of this on the training staff, because they were so preoccupied with dealing with the injuries after they occurred. The trainer is not in a position. They were over there. I believe there were 2 of them, and they were so overwhelmed with just trying to deal with with those injuries that they can't step in. But
the first one's so traumatic that's dealing with a big injury. So you're not looking up to see what's going on the field. You're dealing with this guy who's torn his Achilles and is probably screaming and yelling in pain. Or sometimes it's not as bad, but they all happen on the field. They all happen during the same drill. I know the PA is looking into it, and rightfully so, because something went terribly wrong on that day for the Rough Riders. And we may, if they don't make the playoffs, there's something we could that easily look back on that day as what cost them. I know there's only one offensive guy, the running back, Jonathan Femi Cole, but still, those are huge losses for this team. And you got to look at that aspect of it. And
the middle linebacker. I mean, look at the 2015 season, and Shea Emery goes down. The Riders ended up, and Darian Durant went down that day too. Keenan McDougall went down. They lost 3 pretty important players in one game, but at least those are game-related injuries. Only one of them was an Achilles, that being Darian Durant. But you lose your middle linebacker that early. I mean, so ridiculously early. Sometimes you can overcome it. Ray Williams got hurt in the Banjo Bowl in 2013. He was having a great season. They got by. Mike McCullough stepped in admirably. But I pointed to the Shea Emery example in 1980. And 1979, Cleveland Van blew a knee in the 3rd game of the season against Hamilton, and that's a middle linebacker who, if not for the presence of Dan Kepley, would have been a perennial all-star. And Cleveland Van's in the Plaza of Honor. Well, he blew a knee game 3, and the Riders, that sure didn't help the Riders en route to a 2-14 season. So, and Cleveland Van was never the same when he came back in 1980. So you lose your middle linebacker. That's in many ways a quarterback of your defense. And it's
well, Larry Dean's 32. These 2 of the guys are in their 30s, and how do you bounce back from something like that in your 30s? Like Lacombo and Femi Cole, they can probably bounce back. They're young enough, but I don't know how 30-year-olds bounce back from torn Achilles. It's just such a hard rehab, and to come back. I know Darian Durant came back from it, but we all watched that like crazy, watching to see what he would do, watching for a limp or anything that gave any sort of inkling that he might not be as strong as he looked, but he did come back. So, but it was a tragic day. And
Corey Sheets, Corey had ended his career, and Corey Sheets was 29 when he got hurt with the Oakland Raiders in a preseason game. The one thing I'd like to point out too is I think a lot of people have said, well, why are the riders working out in advance? And they've questioned the wisdom of doing that. I would question the wisdom of not doing that.
Yeah.
When you consider, now, I mean, who knows if that drill, the degree to which that specific drill was a contributor. I wouldn't advise they do that drill again anytime soon. But if you're talking about players who in a lot of cases have been out of the game for almost 2 full seasons, you're talking about them having gone through quarantine, so they've been idle for a period of time. And you don't want to suddenly flip the switch on in a training camp and have them doing things. Yeah. I think you needed some sort of bridge between the conclusion of quarantine and the commencement of training camp. So I think it was very smart for the Rough Riders to do something that allowed the players to kind of ease into it. And I think what we're seeing in the first few days of camp, knock on wood, underlines the fact that, or underlines the likelihood that those workouts were, those 4 injuries aside, beneficial, because we haven't seen a lot of injuries once the actual workouts have begun. Sharon Peak pulled up lame while running a pass pattern on Monday, but by and large, the Rough Riders have been pretty healthy in camp. It was just before camp, but I think they needed that bridge. And maybe they just need to rethink the components of said bridge.
It was pointed out to me too that a lot of the guys the gyms weren't available during this long stage, and a lot of them play basketball, which provides some explosive exercises on those Achilles tendons that you push off and things, and so that gets you ready. But I also agree, you couldn't just send them onto the field Saturday and said, let's play ball. They had to roll things out slowly, and I think their intention was correct to roll things out slowly. Just this one drill, which they said they've done thousands of times, somehow ended up being this catastrophic, this thing that's just didn't. I don't think I have to admit, and I've never seen that drill, and I don't know when they do it thousands of times. Maybe they do it before practice. Maybe they do it on off days when we're not here and seeing stuff. But I've never seen it done at a practice yet. And there's a number of us have watched this and see that. So I don't know if that means anything, but it just says that somehow this drill is so common that it just led to an incredibly uncommon result.
You got to remember too, there were two Achilles tendon injuries in Montreal.
Montreal too, yes. We don't know where they happened. Yeah.
Was it the drill, or was it? I would think it probably wasn't the same drill, but was it the drill on top of the hiatus?
Well, Larry Dean posted a video today on his Twitter account. He's really a very social person. I was kind of looking forward to dealing with him, and just says, he's going to go to the surgery, get that Achilles cleaned up, and see what happens. Will he come back?
I mean, he'll be 33 in August. That's a real tall order to ask somebody to come back in a season which they turned 34 when they haven't played since 2019. But I sure hope that Larry Dean can defy the odds there.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Freddie Bishop III. That's the other thing. I mean, I think there was a very strong chance that Freddie Bishop III was going to make the Rough Riders roster. There's somebody who had 11 sacks for the Calgary Stampeders once upon a time, and they do have to replace Charleston Hughes, and so he had he's had, of all the players who were trying out for the Rough Riders at defensive end this year, he had the most sacks in a season of any of them. Yeah. AC Leonard had 9 in 2019, so that's going to be interesting too, because I think AC Leonard is the only sure bet at defensive end now, and suddenly he's going to be the defensive end that the other teams target and Rough Riders accentuate. The other teams don't have to look at Charleston Hughes anymore. So how does he respond to being the guy that opposing teams key on? I think he could really be in for a big year, though. I mean, if the Rough Riders won the 2019 West Division Final, I think there would have been a lot more recognition of what AC Leonard did in that game, because he was tremendous. Yeah. But you lose the game and nobody remembers. Ray Williams had an amazing game in the 2009 Grey Cup. I think 10 tackles and 3 sacks or something like that. And that's an afterthought.
Wonder how that one ended. Maybe we can touch on this a little bit too. We're here. We're in the press box, max free. We're COVID. Well, we're not purposely social distancing. We just don't like each other that much.
Well, we should have used some Listerine. I
knew I forgot to do something this morning when I was shaving for the 3rd day in a row. It was kind of cool to be here. It's kind of such an interesting just from Saturday to Sunday. Saturday we're in here in full COVID protective mode. Sunday, you're back, no masks. The world is wide open. We're as normal can be, except we're in the press box. The coaches are not on the field wearing masks. An interesting little thing, I don't know if I should tell it, the Riders video staff was walking out yesterday while I was upstairs, and we had to keep our distance because I didn't have a mask on. And I've known these guys for a long time, and it was kind of a weird situation that we couldn't chat because I didn't have a mask, and I didn't put on. So the CFL is still under strict protocol. It's very strict. There's still not any fans allowed here. The rumor is next week, or the suggestion is maybe next week they're going to look at things, but there's no I don't know. There's no reason why they shouldn't, and no reason why they should. But the CFL is not fooling around with this, and they're going to get to August 5th and 6th and kick off a season and keep these guys as healthy as they can by following these strict rules. So fans are going to have to get used to it. The interaction is not going to be. I don't think people will be able to wait around the door to interact with them after a game and stuff. This is it's still COVID's still out there, folks, and we still have to keep fighting it just because we have our masks off. And maybe I can say to them, get vaccinated, folks, because if you want to come to I know it's not the same, but boy, being double vaxxed is such a relief, and knowing that you've done everything you can to make sure that people won't get COVID.
Can I go my second rant? It drives me nuts that we have this vaccine that is the solution. And in the United States, 99.2% of the people who have died of COVID lately have been those who were not vaccinated. The numbers do not lie, unlike many of the people who are COVID deniers and anti-vaxxers. I understand there's medical reasons for not taking the vaccine. I totally get that. But honestly, I can't believe the number isn't well over 90%. I mean, vaccines pretty much eliminated smallpox. And look at the scourge that COVID has been, and look how many people we've lost. You were sitting right now in the very C22 that Warren Woods always occupied in the press box. And wouldn't Woodsy have been? The vaccines just didn't come along quite in time for Woodsy. Yeah. We lost him on January 20th, and a colleague of ours, Robert Watson, died of COVID, and his wife had it. My sister's entire family had COVID. So after all that, why the hesitancy of 30% of the population to get this? And I'm also, it just absolutely blows my mind. The other thing is, you mentioned that COVID isn't over, and I think there's still that apprehension. CJME on the Green Zone posted something on Twitter noting that none of the Rider games have sold out to this point, and not even the Labor Day Classic. And you wonder the degree to which the everybody come on in policy and the not requirement, or the lack of a requirement for proof of vaccination, is contributing to a wariness that may deter people from buying tickets. There may be other factors. People have taken a kicking economically, and football tickets may not be as affordable for some as they were prior to the pandemic, et cetera, et cetera. But is that a deterrent? My wife does not want to go to a football game. I used to buy her tickets all the time. And so is that going to impact attendance? Scott Moe has said he wants a full Mosaic Stadium, but have the policies enacted by Scott Moe and his government worked against that? I'll be really interested to see the early season attendance figures in Winnipeg as opposed to Saskatchewan. Mm-hmm. And they're especially pivotal for the Rough Riders of the Western teams, because Riders' first 4 games are at home, 5 of the first 6. If, let's say, people are more amenable to going to a Rider game later in the season than early, the Riders' opportunities to attract home crowds are really front-loaded. So is this going to have a further economic impact on the team? But why aren't people getting vaccinated? Why is that number 95%? This is so silly.
Yeah. I don't have any answer for you. I don't know anybody who's not vaccinated. So I don't know anybody who's not double vaccinated. So that just says in my circle of friends, we're all going to go that. We've all tired of this, of all the protocols, all the mask wearing, all the not seeing our grandkids, not seeing my grandson when he was born for 3 or 4 weeks and stuff. So there's so many things that we're allowed to do now. I think, and I'm going to mention our colleague, Arthur Whitney, one of our reporters, was at Dabo's.
Arthur White Crummy.
Sorry, I know I should have had that. Was at Dabo's on Saturday night to get people letting loose and having fun. And it's like,
What a great story.
what a great story. And now we should post a link on there, but it's just a well done story, and give Arthur credit for going out there and getting all these people. And some of the, the kids are just kids, eh? They're just kids, 20 years old.
And they feel invulnerable. They feel invulnerable.
Yeah,
and I don't understand the demographics of who. I mean, I would presume that the older people, and we fall into that category, are a lot more receptive to and anxious to get vaccinated than the younger crowd, who may feel invincible. But this thing means business, and it's not going away. And I wonder about the CFL's policy, such as it is, that allows vaccinated and non-vaccinated players to intermingle. I understand that there's privacy issues and whatever, but is this going to be a powder keg? As it's easier to enforce a quarantine and strict restrictions earlier in the season, but after a month or two, you got a lot of players who might you're just living in a dorm, you're sequestered in an apartment or a house. If one player decides to, okay, I'm going to go socialize, I'm going to go to a club, and then you get COVID from a non-vaccinated person, and
you're vaccinated, all
of a sudden the whole team gets it. Honestly, the intermingling of vaccinated and non-vaccinated players in training camp, regular season, I just wonder if down the road that's going to be a factor. And the lack of a tiered policy, such as the one that exists in the National Football League, is also concerning. There's a lot of incentives in the National Football League for a player to get vaccinated. There aren't as many in the Canadian Football League, and I fail to understand why.
As I said, maybe someone can explain it. I can see the medical reasons, but I still think the benefits of being vaccinated would outweigh any medical reason I could possibly think of. And these people who make up all the side effects are minimal. I know I had a little bit of one from my first shot, but I didn't even think about it being the shot. I just thought I was having an off day.
Well, I got my second dose on a Monday, and on a Tuesday I rode my bike for 112 kilometers. And I'm 57 years old. I have an underlying condition, that being type 2 diabetes. Didn't stop me in the least. I had a sore arm for a little while. Now I understand that people have reactions, healthier people than me, or have had adverse reactions. But what would you rather have? Maybe if you feel like you have the flu for a couple of days, or get COVID.
Yeah.
That's not much of a decision, but I hope a month from now or 2 months from now or whatever, we can just even forget that. We won't forget, but maybe some of the fears that we're perhaps perpetuating here may prove to be unfounded. But you really wonder, because it isn't over, yet there seems to be an attitude out there that it is over. And where's the incentivization for people to get a vaccine right now? You're not really restricted you're not limited by anything anymore.
I think if you want to travel, maybe that'll be the incentive. I want to travel because I know you have your dog and you may never ever leave the living room again. But I want to travel. I want to go somewhere. I want to go back to Mexico and these things that. Well, Mac Henry, I'll just tell you something. Looked like Mac Henry just blew up an offensive lineman here on the way by there. So that's they're doing offensive lineman versus defensive lineman drills down at the end of the field. This is one of my favorite things to watch, is big guy on big guy, and you're not supposed to take him to the ground, but Mac Henry just had a good straight arm, good push, and put one of the guys on the ground. So good for Mac Henry. Good guy. I know that one of you say that a lot, but he did a lot in the community during this long break. He worked with a lot of kids and still does. And good for Mac on that.
Yeah, tremendous person. You talk about a guy who's taken opportunities presented to him in life and done a lot with them and been a key member of the community. Another nice person is Isaac Harker, who just threw a bullet over the middle right after just throwing a great corner pattern to draftee Kean Schaefer-Baker. So
Tom Flacco just followed that up with a nice little out pattern I know we have to look at the numbers, folks. Please excuse me. To Randy Satterfield. Satterfield make a nice diving catch and a good pass. But he goes down the middle. Flacco down the middle to, can you see that?
Jordan Williams-Lambert, number 7. Wearing Joey Walters, number 17.
So this is play by. I know this is going to be. This will be after the fact, but no one can come here and watch. We could be making this up. We could be saying anything we want to do. We have the freedom to use. There goes another long pass to incomplete. We won't say you threw that one.
Who did throw that one?
From Flacco. Tom Flacco has the amazing background. I know people looked at his brother Joe was a Super Bowl, which one again, Rob? MVP?
I don't want to talk about that season because they beat Denver in the
Everyone
playoffs.
beats Denver.
2014
Everyone beats Denver.
Super Bowl.
I don't have to talk about that. That was whatever Super Bowl, but he's interesting to get to know him a little bit, see if he makes the team.
And he's an interesting story. I mean, there's a guy who played baseball, was drafted in the major leagues, I believe. There's a really interesting. His entire family, all his brothers have been involved in sports, and he's looked really good. He's got a real presence in the pocket, and I guess we'd be remiss, Murph, for not talking if we don't talk about the quarterbacks and the potential pecking order here, because I'm not sure of the.
Hey, don't tell anybody, Rob. I got a secret for you. Fajardo's start. How's that? He's going to throw a pass right now. He's just got just a little bit too far outside for Shaqi Evans.
But who's number two? It doesn't look like they're going to. Teams can dress a third quarterback this year, but it's not.
I think it's Isaac Harker. Based on what I know, it's Isaac Harker. He's a guy with the experience. So I'm watching downfield to someone I couldn't see his name. Sorry, folks. I think it's Isaac Harker, and the other ones are fighting for third string. Now, Paxton Lynch, we've kind of made it through the whole thing without even mentioning his name. We'll see what he does. American football quarterbacks have come up. Many of them come up here, and none of them have done anything. So it's asking a lot. I think he might be one of the first younger ones in his.
He's only 27 years old.
So his career isn't over by any stretch. He lit it up in Memphis, and I think he's still, regardless of what happened after he got drafted, he still got drafted in the first round, and someone still had the mindset that he could play. He was worth the first round pick. Like, what general manager would trade up to get a guy like that anyway?
Well, John Elway.
There's a deep one. So who would do that? And that was to Linnius, by the way, but it was over his head. So I hope we're not confusing people with giving you our play-by-play here. We're just
Paxton Lynch is about to throw now, so
we'll stay for this.
Wearing Darian Durant's old number 4, which is another issue. Wow. I look out here. I see somebody wearing number 4, and I see a receiver wearing number 81, and I just think. Here
goes. And who's I'm trying to see? Stop and go. It looks like it's. And it's a nice deflection
and knocked by Nick Marshall.
So
Paxton Lynch, I mean, he comes here and he's serious about it, and there's no reason to think he isn't. Based upon his Zoom call with the media on Monday, he seems like a really nice young man, and that's the whole. He doesn't come up here with any sense of entitlement. A lot of Americans, or some Americans, will come up here thinking they're going to own this league, and then discover pretty quickly that that's not going to be the case. They're still dealing with a lot of 1 or 2 percenters when you talk about their rank in terms of where they got in the football world. That was a nice catch. Yeah, that was a dart. And but I mean, if he's serious about it, that was Jake Hardy. We've got it with a nice catch. We've got a really interesting battle here, because we'll get a good read on what they think of what Jason Moss thinks of Isaac Harker, because the last game that Jason Moss coached with the Edmonton Eskimos was on November 2nd, 2019 against the Saskatchewan-roughriders, and that was the day that the Isaac Harker quarterbacked the Roughriders in place of Cody Fajardo, who had the oblique injury, and Isaac Harker went 23 for 28 for 213 yards and helped the Riders beat Edmonton, quarterbacked by Chad Kilgore, to clinch first place. So Jason Moss has had experience game planning against Isaac Harker. He'll have a good read on him, not only as an ally, but as an opponent.
I think I'm just going to interrupt here. Like Paxton Lynch just 3 nice passes, nice zip on the ball, really good rotation, lots of power. You think when you're 6'7", you can really generate some power on those passes. So he just had one little outing here. I think he looked pretty good. He looked better than I think he did yesterday.
Way better than yesterday. The first long pass he threw yesterday was. Well, I think it was supposed to be a long pass. It wasn't quite as long as it was supposed to be, but he looks a lot more comfortable today. And so that's our play-by-play. I think we should leave this to Derek Taylor. This is an important thing. I've got to test my blood sugar. For the first time ever on a podcast, I've got to test my blood sugar. So
why don't we let you go?
Why don't you do a soliloquy or sing or
why don't we just stop, Rob, and we'll do it right here. It's a good way to end it. How about we do that?
Okay. I've got
Rob,
to test.
I want to thank you for your time. Rob and I will be here.
Tester.
We'll be here all week, as they say. Tip your waiter, tip your server. We'll be here and read all about us in the Leader Post. And if you're more interested in Paxton Lynch, we have a whole page devoted to him in the paper today. So check that out and maybe even buy a paper. Help us out.
And Murray, you did a really nice job of the Paxton Lynch story, getting some other voices, and not just that of Paxton Lynch, but Joe Craig Jr. played with him at the University of Memphis, and Joe was a Rough Rider for a spell in 2016, bit of 2017. Mark, you talked to Troy Rank, a member of the media in Denver. A lot of interesting voices there and a really good story. So I just got to find the little extra that are. Do you have it on your?
A little what?
The little sign off that Mark Melnichuk, our producer, is.
Here
it is. I got it.
Sorry.
If you enjoy the podcast, please leave a review and a 5-star rating. 5 stars out of 5 as opposed to 100. It helps us grow the podcast. You can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. What is Stitcher? If you'd like to send us a question, you can email Rob, that is me, at rvanstone@postmedia.com, and we'll read it on the show. You can follow me on Twitter at Rob Vanstone or Murray at MurrayLP. So that's our show for today. I've got to do my blood testing, and hopefully I'm still alive after I do this. So for Murray McCormick, Mark Melnichuk, our producer, I'm Rob Vanstone, and thank you so much for your time today. Go Expos, Murray.
Yep. Talk to you next week.
You bet.